Jesus didn't have a problem with people that's in the streets. He had a problem with religious people.
How can I help anybody when I was not even able to help my own son?
I would never do that. And I became that in a matter of minutes when they took my pain pills away.
And I said, I'm not where I want to be, but thank God I'm not what I used to be.
This is Faith in Your Recovery. I am Randy Davis. Welcome to the battle. Hey folks, thanks for joining us. We welcome you once again to Faith in Your Recovery. I'm Randy Davis. We look forward to sharing with you today. Hope that you will get something from this and go out of here wiser about recovery than you entered, okay? And when you do, it'd be great for us if you just like, subscribe, and share. That'd be the best present you could give us this Christmas season. We look forward to this. Once again, thanks for tuning in. Our guest today is Ken Purdy. Welcome, Ken.
Hi, Randy. It's good to be here today.
Good to have you. Tell the folks where you're from. Give them a quick rundown, and then we'll go back into your story here.
I'm from Wabash, Indiana. I've lived there pretty much my entire life, except for my college years and my first few years of employment. I'm a member of the First United Methodist Church there, and that's where we have our Brianna's Hope meetings, and that's where I found God, was at a Brianna's Hope meeting. He'd always been in my life, but I ran into an old AA buddy there at a Brianna's Hope meeting, and he helped turn my life around.
We want to hear about that story here in just a little while. You talk about Brianna's Hope, A Better Life, Brianna's Hope. Our Faith in Your Recovery podcast falls under that umbrella. I just want folks to recognize that. I'm sure you're aware of it. But Brianna's Hope, we call ourselves participant-driven, faith-based, compassion-filled, support recovery movement for those battling the battle with substance use disorder or addiction. And we're about all things recovery here on our podcast. So it sounds to me like you've got a story to tell. Let's go back in those early years where you first started fighting the battle with addiction, or where you took that slide down into that darkness. Tell us about that, please.
Well, my addiction really started and has been pretty much my entire adult life. I never really started drinking till I got to college. I'd never experimented with marijuana or anything before I got there. So I pretty much spent my entire life abusing alcohol.
Tell us, where did you go to college? I know that has nothing to do with your addiction. I'm not trying to say that, but just out of curiosity.
Randy, I'd like to back up a little bit if we could here.
Absolutely.
For me, it usually helps if I start at the bottom and work my way to the top, so to speak.
Do that for us.
So let me get my bottom out of the way, and that'll kind of tell folks where I was at.
Awesome.
My bottom was September 16th. 2016. And the day started out just like any other normal day. I got up and I puked my guts out. I no longer looked in the mirror the first thing in the morning and swore to myself that I wasn't going to drink that day. The first thing I did after I got done throwing up was head out to the garage and find one of the bottles I had stuffed away. I would go out and chug that down until I could keep one down, and then I was good to go for the day. I was retired by then, and so it was a little tougher to get alcohol. I was out on bond from my fourth DUI and my fifth arrest. And so my wife had me on a pretty tight leash as far as where my money was being spent. And so I had a hard time getting alcohol, and of course I didn't have a driver's license. So that morning when she wanted to go to Walmart, I was up for the trip because I knew I could get into a store. And the first thing I did when we hit the parking lot was I ran into the store, headed right for the liquor aisle, and I stuffed one of them traveler-sized bottles down my pants and headed right for the bathroom. And I had that down me before she even got in the door. After that, she had another errand to run, and while she went in to do this was getting some alterations done for my mother. And seemed like she was taking a long time, and I was sitting in the Jeep that we had. The effects of the alcohol were starting to hit me pretty good. And pretty much the last thing I remember is my wife coming out and me being in the driver's seat of the vehicle. I know she told me, "You're not driving," and I agreed. And I started to get out of the vehicle. Well, the next thing I knew, I was surrounded by the police, and I didn't know really what was going on. They took me to the hospital where I guess I was told that I had tested 4-7. That's what they told me. I don't know. Could have been. Anyway, so they took me to jail and booked me in. And while there, all I could scream was I wasn't driving because I was out on bond from that other DUI, and I knew I was going to get in trouble again. That was my only concern until when they were booking me in, they told me that I had ran over my wife. And that I just couldn't comprehend how that could have happened. But that was one of the charges that they were filing against me was serious injury with causing bodily harm. Well, they put me in the drunk tank, and it wasn't the first time I'd been there, of course, but that was the first time they ever gave you a blanket in the drunk tank. They must have seen how bad off I was or something, and so looking at these charges at me and hearing about my wife being ran over,
Can you tell us what her injuries were?
She ended up with a couple broken ribs and a punctured lung.
Okay.
She was taken to Fort Wayne Parkview Hospital. It wasn't really life-threatening, but at the time,
still serious injury.
Very, very serious. And so I took that blanket that they'd given me in jail, and I tried to hang myself in the drunk tank. Well, it wasn't very long, and the officers came in and got me down and put me in one of those turtle suits in the rubber room. And so I lay there, and they didn't know that I had a partial denture in my bottom teeth that had some metal in it. So I took out my partial denture and proceeded to hack on my wrist. I'd given up, and I'd had enough. And they must have seen me on camera because they came in and found me in a puddle of blood and took me to the hospital to get me stitched up. I might add, both times at the hospital, Pastor John and Pastor Kurt, Pastor John Cook and Pastor Kurt Freeman from the Wabash Church.
Know them both.
Were at the hospital because I had started attending church after that fourth DUI. But they were there both times at the hospital, and anyway, they took me back to the jail after they'd stitched up my wrist, and they put me in the suicide chair in the recreation room. And that's where I sat until I sobered up enough to realize what was going on. And by then it was September 17th, 2016. And it was my mother's 96th birthday. She was in a nursing home dying of cancer. That was my bottom.
And your wife's in the hospital during all of this, correct? With her injuries from your driving over her.
That is correct. And I had no idea knowing how she was doing or anything.
Were you sober enough to even care during those moments, Ken? I know as you look back, you wanted to care. I get that.
My only concern was being in trouble for driving drunk again.
It was about you at that point.
It was all about me. It always was.
Addiction always is.
It always is.
If it was about others, we'd never get that deeply into it. I don't care if it was alcohol or drugs of another type. I'm always very careful. There are those who like to separate drugs and alcohol. Not me.
I've done some drugs. I experimented, but they were never for me. I could take them or leave them. It was just always the alcohol for me.
Your party came with the alcohol.
Yes. All my trouble stemmed from the alcohol, pretty much, except for one time. But we'll get to that here in a minute.
Yeah.
But as far as being all about me. That goes back to my childhood. I'm a little different than a lot of folks. I didn't come from a broken family. My dad had a good job. My mom stayed at home. She didn't work outside the home till I was in high school. What made me different, though, was I was an only child and an only grandchild. And we lived in a neighborhood that didn't have very many other children around. So I grew up around adults all the time. And a lot of people would probably say I was spoiled, and probably was. I'd never wanted for anything. We never did without. We weren't rich, but we were just comfortable, and life was good. And being around adults all the time, my dad was strict, and he was more than strict. He was tough. His father had passed away when he was 12, and that was the only way he knew how to raise me. And
you're telling my story right now. My dad was very similar, and tough. Yes. Go ahead.
My dad, and I can't hardly remember ever being spanked more than once or twice, but it was just his anger and shame that he would throw on me when I would misbehave caused me to not misbehave and to be good, because that was the mantra in our house. Be good. Be good. Every time I'd leave the house, it was be good.
You knew the penalty if you weren't.
Yes, I knew the penalty, and I also loved the praise when I was good. And being around adults all the time, I learned to be quiet, not ask questions. Children are seen and not heard, and I sat and absorbed a lot. One of the former leaders of our group in Wabash said I was quietly insightful, and I kind of liked that term, and I kind of preferred that term, but here I am today.
Yes.
Anyway, growing up, it was always be good, and really, I was. I was blessed. I was pretty much good at anything I did. We would go to Sundays when I was a kid. Church and God was never brought up in our house. But as a kid, I went to Sunday school. My mother was a member of the First United Methodist Church there in Wabash. I would go to Sunday school. She attended once a month or so, but that's the way I was brought up. And God, religion was never discussed at home. And I just thought, if I was good and I believed in God, which I did, that he would take care of me. And I pretty much lived my entire life believing that. I never developed a relationship with God. I didn't know how, why, or what it meant to have one. And it took me till about 4 years ago for that to happen.
It's never too late.
It is never too late. I just have a lot of catching up to do on that.
Yes.
But anyway, back to the being good here. So I was good. And like in school, my dad expected A's. A's were expected, especially when you were young in citizenship behavior. When you got them, those had to be A's. B's tolerated if there weren't too many of them. A C was unheard of. And in fact, the only C I ever got was a C in health in high school. I like to joke to our group that that's why my wife and I have no children, because I got a C in health in high school. But anyway, high school was a breeze, and so were the athletics. And I was blessed enough that I was able to go to a pretty big-time school at the time for baseball in Georgia. And that was, going to be 1,000 miles away from home. And but I assume my parents thought I had been right. I'd always been good. And so it was off to Georgia I went for college. And it was a totally new experience for sure. I was there, didn't know too many people except my teammates, and they were from all over the country. So we became a real tight-knit group. And part of that was going out and having a good time. Well, the drinking age in Georgia was 18. Well, I had experimented with a beer or two and some Boone's Farm in high school, but that was pretty much the extent of my drinking. So when I got to college and the drinking age was 18, I really didn't know how to handle it. And when we played drinking games and down a six-pack and be drunk and stupid, it was fun.
You could be as athletic as anybody at that as well, right?
Yeah, I could be as good at that as anything, and that was fun. But along came that with the other thing, and that was my classes. Being an athlete, and on the quarter system there, we only had 3 classes a day. And I found out early on that in being an athlete, we could pick our professors in the time of our class. Well, we got some guidance on which professors to get and which classes to take. And I found out pretty early that school was even easier than high school for me. And I made the worst decision of my life. I was tired of being good. And I said to myself early on, B's and C's are going to be just good enough for me. My folks won't know the difference. They had never attended college. And if I start off like this, they'll never know the difference. So I settled for being mediocre for once in my life. The baseball and that went along fine. Things were going good. I was getting, my B's and C's until I started getting injured. And I just couldn't shake being injured. And my one and only prayer I had as a child was to be a professional baseball player. But by the end of my junior year, I knew that prayer was not going to be answered. And so I did an internship so I could graduate a quarter early or fill my credits up a quarter early, and which I did. And by then I had a girlfriend in college, and she had moved into my apartment, and it was pretty much party central because my last couple quarters, they were a breeze. It was just some fill-in classes.
Get through.
Yeah, just some get through. And it was party central there at the house. And before long, I'd finished up my credits, and I decided to hang around with her in Valdosta. That's where the college was, Valdosta, Georgia. And she became pregnant. Well, neither one of us was ready to be parents, but God was the last thing on our mind. We didn't consult God, and she went back down to her hometown of Miami, Florida, and had an abortion. When we got back together, when she came back, things weren't the same, and we split up about the same time as the graduation ceremonies came around. And so with nothing better to do, I moved back to Wabash. And to my parents' basement, the old parents' basement thing. Well, with my dad being strict in my lifestyle these days, I knew that wasn't going to last for
well.
That wasn't
going to.
What
were you, 22 years old, give or take a little?
I was 22 years old with a piece of paper with no clue what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. But God blessed me with the occupation that was to be my life's work, but also my downfall. I found an ad in the Fort Wayne newspaper for a manager of a bowling center up there at the Eagles Lodge. I knew just enough about the bowling business. I'd worked there at a bowling center when I was a kid since I was 14. I knew enough to be dangerous. I filled in on summer break and stuff like that. And I had that piece of paper and a college degree, so I pretty much talked my way into my first job. And that job, all it entailed was keeping the pin setters going, making sure they go up and down, and keeping the customers happy. Well, I made a friend in Fort Wayne who was one of the top mechanics, and he taught me pretty much everything I didn't know about the pin setters. And the other end was keeping the customers happy. Well, I knew how to throw a party, so keeping the customers happy.
That wasn't difficult either.
That was easy.
You could have trained people, yes?
Yes, I could have. But there's a little catch to that, because the folks that would come down there to have their good time, they would come maybe once, twice a week, and then they'd go home and have the rest of their lives the other days of the week. Me, I threw a party 7 days a week. I was still young. I was still in shape. I was still playing a lot of fast-pitch softball, and I could handle it. It wasn't causing a major problem. Yet. It was during this time, though, after my first year, I threw an employees party, or I was going to, for my employees. Well, a few weeks before that, somebody had called and wanted to bring some handicapped kids in to bowl at my bowling center. And and this was in the afternoon, and I said, sure, why not? Well, the first day they walked in, they were going to be there for a few weeks. The first day they came in, a young gal about my age brought him in. And I thought she was pretty cute. And so I worked up the nerve to ask her to this employees party. Well, I want to say right now in February on the 29th of this coming year, we'll be married 44 years. And she has put up with me through everything. So anyway, yeah, she would talk to me a little bit about the drinking, but she was kind of a party girl too, so it was okay. We had a good time. And then it was New Year's Eve in 1983. We were supposed to go to a Wabash to a New Year's Eve party. Now, she hadn't been doing any drinking at all, and she was coming to pick me up at work. And somehow she ran a red light and was broadsided by a big truck. And she was unconscious with life-threatening injuries to her head. She had a broken jaw, unconscious. She lost her spleen. And I was devastated. I went to the hospital that night, not knowing whether she would live or die. And for the next 3 months, I spent my time, since we didn't have a car then, and the other vehicle we had worked sometimes, I'd spend my day walking to and from work, and the hospital happened to be in between. So I would walk back and forth, visit her, work, drink, visit her. It was a 3-month circle. And by the time that she got out, I was drinking pretty heavy then. But she got better, thank the Lord. I didn't thank him. I never did. It was just a blessing that was given to me, like all the other blessings I'd ever received. I was good, so
you deserved it in your own mind, even if you didn't say
I didn't ask. I didn't thank. It just came my way.
You should. I'm good. Good's good enough, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was shortly after this, a friend of mine had a chance. We had a chance to buy the bowling alley that I worked at when I was a kid back in Wabash. And I was blessed again that we were able to do this. And so I moved back to my hometown and took my act there, so to speak.
All right. Took it on the road.
Yes, and I was back with my hometown friends, and life was good. Life was real good until it wasn't. Then came my first arrest. Like I said, drugs weren't my thing, but, we dabbled in marijuana, and it just so happens our bowling alley had been broken into, and they had caught the kids that had broken into it. And the kids had spoken of some marijuana they found in our bowling alley. Well, being friends with the cops in town, they were friends of ours, a lot of them were. They called and said, hey, if you got anything in there, get it out. We got to come search. Well, for some reason, I'd forgotten that I had a vial of cocaine in my coat pocket. And when they came to search, they found it. And it was off to jail I went for my first arrest ever in my entire life.
For possession?
For possession of cocaine.
Okay.
Needless to say, my parents were devastated. I knew I probably had a problem with drinking. It wasn't the drugs, it was the drinking. And this, on the advice of my attorney and my parents and everyone, I entered the Washington House Treatment Center in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And that was my first experience with AA. And what an eye-opener that was. The people that came in to speak, I read the big book, and I was amazed. Them people were me. I couldn't believe it. There was somebody else out there just like me. And I thought to myself, here I am, 30 years old. I have found the answer. Let me put this tool in my toolbox. I can use that one day, because I'm 30 years old and I can't imagine going the rest of my life without another beer or a drink. And so I came back to Wabash and was accepted. And I attended AA, and things were good. But my sentencing, business-wise, things were good. The drinking, not so good. My sentence, I was sentenced to 5 weekends in jail and 3 years probation. The first weekend of jail, I showed up drunk. The second weekend, they didn't know it, or somebody must have told them, because the second weekend when I showed up drunk, they gave me a breathalyzer and held those charges over my head on me to make sure I didn't do that again.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did those weekends into my 3 years probation. Back then, the only test was they would show up once in a while with a breathalyzer, or you had to report.
Right.
And you make sure you weren't drinking at the time. You were good. So I got back into drinking more heavily, and then came DUI number 1. Followed by a few years of off and on sobriety and picking up some tools along the way at different counseling places and more AA meetings. I'd slow down, maybe even quit for a while, but I'd pick it back up. And usually the way it goes, you pick up right where you left off and go from there. And so by the time DUI number 4 came along, I'd pretty much had it. I knew there had to be an answer someplace. I had a whole toolbox full of tools. I just didn't know.
What do I do with them?
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with them.
Want to use them?
So my wife wanted to start going to church. And I was 100% into that. I said, hey, we'll find another tool there. Maybe this is the answer. And I said, well, if we're going to church, I want to go back to where I grew up, the Wabash First United Methodist Church. Being a businessman in town, I knew a lot of people there.
There was an identity, absolutely.
Yeah. Let me backtrack a little bit. In between... while I had the bowling center there and this DUI, right after that happened, my partner and I split up. He'd had all the drinking from me that he could take, and my option was fix up what the building had and buy him out, or close the building and buy out the other center in town, which I did. And that came with a full bar with a whole host of other things and opportunities. By my 4th DUI, I was pretty much buying vodka, 3 cases at a time, because you would get one free, and I'd be lucky to sell 2 or 3 bottles out of that case. The rest I was drinking myself. But amazingly, I could still do my job. That, I was a functioning, I thought, alcoholic. Looking back, I didn't function so well, but business was still good in spite of myself. Let's say that.
Let's move on forward here with the time we've got left.
Sure.
We've heard that. We've heard your stories, certainly. You mentioned the low in 2016 there, September 12th. Is that what it was? 14th?
September 16th.
September 16th. You
2016.
Talked about that. Tell us how you've come out of this. I want to leave the folks with that hope and promise that recovery does happen.
Exactly.
So I want you to hit on that.
Exactly, because now we're getting to the best part of it. Because coming back to church, I went for the a few months before I hit my bottom. But I really was just sitting there listening. But after my bottom and going back to church, I became a lot more involved, and that's when Brianna's Hope started. And there were times I would go to Brianna's Hope, and I was just sober. I was still missing something in my life, but I was sober and getting a lot out of Brianna's Hope and my involvement in the church. I involved myself in a lot of the church activities and everything. And the turning point came when an old AA friend started coming to Brianna's Hope. And he introduced me to, he asked me one day, "Why are you so miserable?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm sober. I'm coming to church. I believe in God. I think I'm doing all the right things." And he goes, "Well, what's your relationship with God like?" And I really didn't know what he meant. And I said, "I try to pray, but I'm not very good at it. In fact, the only prayer I ever asked for, I never got. So I just try to be good and try to stay sober. And he seems to be helping me, but I'm still miserable." He said, "Just talk to God. He'll listen to you. And believe me, he will answer you." And so I did. I took that to heart, and being an only child, I was kind of used to talking to myself, and so I just started directing them conversations to him. My self-esteem was shot. All the years of drinking, I'd been up to about 250 pounds, and I was still at 225, and I just didn't like myself very much. And one of the first prayers I did ask God, I said, "Please let me lose some weight so I can at least look good and feel better about myself." And lo and behold, I just started losing weight. This happened during COVID. I was fat when COVID started. I never got COVID, but when COVID ended, I came back to church and I was 165 pounds.
So
I'd went from 225.
60 pounds.
I'd lost 65 pounds in that time, and that's just one of the ways that God has started working in my life, and I found that every day just having a conversation with God. I have an ongoing conversation with Him all the time.
Go ahead, give our folks your advice to them. Should they be at the same place in life where you were? They're still being beaten down by that drink or that drug or something else in their life. Give them some hope.
The hope out there is get those tools. There's a lot of places around to gather the tools, but find a relationship with God in your life, because He's the one that has the instructions. You can have a whole toolbox full of tools, but unless you have God in your heart and in your mind and a relationship, He's the one with the key to that toolbox and all those instructions to the tools.
Define for you continue to use the word relationship. Define relationship in your words. I'm not asking for Webster's definition or the Wikipedia. I want Ken Purdy's definition of relationship with God. What does that mean to you?
The best friend and brother I never had.
So, You've come into the closeness He wants you to have. He's filled the void of what you had never experienced before. And I'm going to guess you're continuing to learn more about Him every day.
Every single day. Like I said, in A Better Life, Brianna's Hope, I'm not where I want to be, but I'm glad that I'm not where I was.
Amen. That's one of our opening comments on our canned intro that we used by Mr. Von Walker. And there's a lot of truth in it. We're all at that place. I am convinced my goal is to help people become the best them they can become. And I haven't gotten there yet. It doesn't mean I have. But the next day, the next move gives me an opportunity to be a better me, to be more of the me God created me to be. And that's my goal.
Yes, I just want to be a better person every day, and I really am enjoying trying to help people. It is such a struggle out there.
For all of us, whether alcohol has been a part of your life or not, something has. We've all got a closet monster of some type we're dealing with. And, we need each other's support.
Yeah, I find the folks in addiction, they have so many other problems going on with finding employment, making their
housing,
paying their court fees and their fees for their treatment,
getting the license back that you've referred to in different ways.
Yeah, and sometimes the stress of all that causes them to want to, burst someplace, and unfortunately, the weak spot is their addiction.
Why not turn back to it? This didn't get me anywhere. Yeah. Listen, Ken, is there anything you want to wrap up with here? Comment you want to make, statement you want to share, or challenge you want to give? We're getting close to the end. I want to give you that chance.
I just want to urge everybody that if you're in a treatment program and not feeling like you're getting much or anything out of it, take a look at your relationship with God. If you don't have one, try to develop one, because I truly believe the only way to true sobriety is through Jesus Christ.
I'm right there with you, buddy. I feel that 100%. And folks, we're not telling you what to do. We're telling you what's worked for us in each one of our lives. And we challenge you. We challenge you to that commitment with Christ. Be open. We always say we want to be raw. We want to be real. Jesus wants us to be. He knows anyway. We can't hide it from Him. So we wish you folks the best. We pray for you. Continue to pray for us here at Faith in Your Recovery. Ken, pray for him. Pray for me. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. We wish you the merriest of Christmases. God bless. Stay in the battle. Amen.